used to think I knew exactly how my life would go. I had a husband, a daughter, and a routine that comforted me. The days bled into one another in a rhythm I found predictable and, for the most part, fulfilling. But all it took was one glance, one shift in energy, for everything to change. That glance came from someone I never imagined seeing in that light. Michael, my husband's best friend. My name is Claire Westbrook. I'm 37 years old, a part-time art teacher, and married to Jonathan. John, as everyone calls him. We've been married for 11 years. Our daughter, Emily, is 9, a bright little soul who brings color into our world. John is a good man, truly. He's stable, responsible, always showing up to parent-teacher conferences, always remembering birthdays. But somewhere along the way, we became roommates more than lovers. Conversations turned into checklists, groceries, school drop-offs, utility bills. Our connection dulled, replaced by routine comfort. I never really noticed how much I missed being seen, until Michael looked at me like that. Michael Reed had always been part of our world. He and John went back to college days, baseball teammates, roommates, lifelong friends. He was the one who gave the best toasts, remembered inside jokes, and always brought wine instead of beer to our barbecues. He was handsome, sure, with that rugged confidence that seemed to follow him. But he had always been John's friend to me, just a fixture in our social circle. Until that one rainy Tuesday. I had just come home from Emily's piano lesson, soaked and annoyed. My car's wipers weren't working properly, and I hadn't had time to fix them. John was working late. Again. When I stepped inside the house, I found Michael standing in our kitchen, pouring himself coffee from the pot I had made hours earlier. "Hey," he said, looking up with a soft smile. "You look like you swam here." I laughed, brushing wet strands from my face. "I feel like I did." "Here." He walked over and handed me a clean towel from the basket by the laundry room. He stood a little too close, just close enough that I caught the smell of cedar and leather on his jacket. "You okay?" That's when it happened. The look. Not just concern or politeness, but something else. His eyes didn't scan the room or dart to the TV like usual. They stayed fixed on me, lingering. Studying. Admiring? I wrapped the towel around my shoulders, trying to focus. "Yeah. Just tired. It's been a day." "You don't say that often," he replied, still not moving away. "You always seem like the strong one." There it was again, that tone. I didn't know what to say, so I smiled awkwardly and turned toward the hallway. But something had shifted. Over the next few weeks, Michael started stopping by more often. Sometimes with takeout, sometimes with a bottle of wine John liked. Sometimes just to check on how things were going. John never seemed to notice. He was buried in work, always glued to his laptop. Michael, on the other hand, started noticing everything. One Saturday, I wore a yellow sundress I hadn't worn in years. John didn't say a word, but when Michael dropped by to return a drill he'd borrowed, his eyes widened the moment he saw me. "You look beautiful, Claire," he said, his voice quieter than usual. I should have shrugged it off. I should have laughed. But instead I froze. My heart thumped louder than it should have. "Thanks," I whispered, and when our eyes met, I felt it again. That look. That unspoken pull. I began to crave it. Not him, I told myself. Just the attention. Just the reminder that I was still a woman. Not just a wife or a mother or a planner of school lunches. But deep down I knew it was more than that. One evening, John had to leave for a conference in Chicago. He kissed me on the cheek as he left, barely looking up from his phone. Emily was spending the weekend with my sister in San Diego. The house felt too quiet, too hollow. Around 8 p.m., there was a knock at the door. It was Michael. "I thought you might want company," he said, holding 2 cups of coffee and a smile that reached his eyes. I knew I should have said no. I should have shut the door. But I didn't. We talked for hours. About art, about travel, about regrets. He told me about the woman he almost married but didn't. I told him about the dreams I had before motherhood swallowed them whole. At some point, our hands brushed. Neither of us pulled away. "I've always seen you," he said quietly, not touching me but not moving away either. Even when John didn't. Even when you didn't. I could feel tears forming, but I held them back. It felt so wrong. And yet so right. When he leaned in slowly, cautiously, I didn't move. His lips barely grazed mine. It wasn't a kiss so much as a question. A question I answered by closing my eyes and leaning in further. That night, nothing more happened. No lines were physically crossed. But emotionally, we had stepped far beyond the border. The next morning, Michael left early. He didn't say much, just smiled softly and touched my hand before leaving. I stared at the closed door for a long time. When John came back from his trip, I tried to act normal. But I couldn't ignore the ache. Not guilt. Confusion. I couldn't forget the way Michael made me feel. Like I mattered, like I was alive. I stopped returning his texts. I avoided places I knew he'd be. I thought that would fix things. But silence only made the feelings louder. Weeks passed, and I buried myself in routine. I cooked, I worked, I smiled at John's coworkers during his company picnic. I laughed with Emily at her jokes. I tried so hard to forget. Then one evening, Michael showed up again. I opened the door and immediately felt a wave of emotions crash over me. His expression was softer than usual. Not confident, but vulnerable. "I'm moving," he said. "Got a job offer in Seattle. I leave next week." I felt the breath leave my chest. "I didn't come to ask you for anything," he continued. "I just wanted you to know that, whatever we felt, whatever that moment was, it meant something. You made me feel seen too. And I'll never forget it." I nodded. My voice caught in my throat. "I thank you for saying that." He turned to leave, then paused. "Claire, don't lose yourself. Not for anyone. Not even for comfort." And then he was gone. That night, I sat with John in our living room. He was watching TV, the glow of the screen casting shadows on his face. I turned to him and said quietly, "Are you happy, John?" He looked surprised. "Yeah, I guess." "Why?" I hesitated. "Do you think we still see each other?" He turned off the TV. For the first time in a long time, he really looked at me. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe we stopped trying." That conversation led to another. Then another. We didn't magically fix things overnight, but we began the process. Therapy. Honesty. Hard truths. I never told him about Michael. But I think he sensed there was more behind my questions than I let on. And maybe that's why he started trying too. Michael moved on. I never heard from him again. But his absence remained. Not like a wound, but like a mirror. A reminder of who I was beneath the surface. Of what I needed to feel alive again. I didn't fall in love with Michael. But he reminded me to fall back in love with myself. And maybe, just maybe, that's what changed everything.